The champagne was the kind my mother brought out for occasions she had decided mattered, and I stood with my glass near the fireplace and watched my sister hold court in the center of the living room and tried to remember the last time I had been the reason for the good champagne. I could not. My name is Alice Ortiz, and I have spent 28 years being the other daughter. Not the difficult one, not the embarrassing one, just the other one, the reliable one, the practical one, the one who could be counted on to handle logistics while the event itself was happening to someone else. Tonight, the event was Nora's engagement party. She had been engaged to Ashton Cleary for 11 days, and in those 11 days, my mother had sourced fresh flowers, reorganized the living room furniture, and compiled a guest list that included everyone who had ever witnessed a significant moment in Nora's life. The champagne was from a case Dad had been keeping in the basement for what he called the right occasion. Nora stood in the center of it, all wearing a dress the color of good wine and the expression of someone who had never, in 31 years, been surprised to find a room oriented around her. "Darling, you look absolutely radiant," Mom said, smoothing a piece of Nora's hair that had not needed smoothing. "Ashton is such a catch. I knew the moment I met him." I took a sip of champagne. 6 months ago, when I told my parents I was engaged to Nicholas, my mother had been standing at the kitchen counter opening mail. She looked up, said he seems nice enough, and looked back down. That was the whole of it. No champagne. No reorganized furniture. No flowers. "Alice, honey," Dad's voice from across the room. He was not looking at me. "Could you grab more of those appetizers from the kitchen?" "Of course," I said. Nicholas materialized at my elbow before I had taken a step, his hand finding the small of my back with the ease of someone who has learned where to stand. "I'll help," he said to no one in particular, and followed me through the kitchen door. In the kitchen, I began arranging the backup platter, crackers, cheese, the small stuffed mushrooms Mom had made that morning. Nicholas opened another bottle of wine without being asked and set it on the counter to breathe. "You okay?" he said. "Fine." He waited. He was good at waiting, better than almost anyone I had ever known, the specific patience of someone who understands that fine is rarely the end of a sentence. "It's just I lined up a row of crackers with more precision than was necessary." "Do you ever wonder if a person can be invisible to someone who sees them every day?" He came around the counter and pulled me against him, his chest warm and solid, and I stayed there for a moment with my cheek against his shoulder and my hand still holding the cheese knife. "I see you," he said, "every day, completely." From the living room came a burst of laughter, Nora's laugh, which carried in the particular way of people who have never been told to keep it down, and then her voice telling the story of the proposal. I could hear it through the kitchen door, and then Ashton got down on one knee right there in Central Park with the string quartet playing our song, a pause for effect. I just completely lost it. I was sobbing. It was like a fairy tale. "It really was," Mom's voice. I heard her sigh, the particular sigh she reserved for moments she wanted to remember. Nicholas's arms tightened slightly around me. Nicholas had proposed to me on a Thursday evening in our apartment. He had cooked dinner badly, which he acknowledged with the self-deprecating honesty that was one of the things I loved most about him. And after we had eaten, he had taken my hand and pulled me up from the table and slow danced with me in our tiny living room to a song playing on his phone. And then he had stopped dancing and asked me, quietly and directly, with no string quartet and no Central Park, just our living room and the remains of a not quite successful dinner and the specific earnestness of a man who meant exactly what he was saying. My mother's response when I told her, "At least you're finally settling down, Alice." I stepped back from Nicholas and picked up the platter. "Ready," I said. He held the kitchen door open for me. The living room conversation had shifted. I was crossing toward the side table when Nora's voice dropped to the register she used when she wanted to seem confidential without actually being so, audible to anyone paying attention, which she understood and accounted for. "Speaking of the wedding," she was saying to Mom, "I've been thinking about Alice's dress." I stopped, not deliberately. My feet simply stopped, the platter balanced in both hands, my body making the decision before my mind caught up. "The one she bought for her wedding," Mom said, "it's just sitting in her closet at home, and my wedding is in 3 months, hers isn't until next year. That dress would be absolutely perfect for the garden ceremony. The lace, the color, I'm sure she wouldn't mind," Mom said. I heard the certainty in her voice, the comfortable assumption of the person who has never had to find out whether someone minds because the answer has always been assumed in advance. "You are her sister after all. I'll talk to her tomorrow," Nora said. "She'll understand, she always does." I stood very still with the platter in my hands. The dress had taken me 4 months to find. I had gone to 11 shops, 2 estate sales, and 1 online auction before I found it, ivory lace over silk. A silhouette that was neither fashionable nor unfashionable, but simply right, the kind of garment that looks as if it was made for a specific person and had been waiting for that person to appear. I had put down the deposit with money from 3 months of overtime shifts because the wedding budget my parents had offered, a number considerably smaller than what I later learned they were spending on Nora's, did not cover it. The dress was in my childhood bedroom closet because my apartment did not have adequate space for a garment bag, and I had trusted that it would be safe there. I walked into the living room and set the platter on the side table. The crackers jumped slightly with the impact. A few heads turned. "Everything okay, sweetie?" Dad asked, looking at me with the mildly startled expression of someone who has not been expecting to need to look at me. I met Nora's eyes across the room. She had the grace to hold my gaze, which was more than I might have expected, and in her expression was the thing I had been reading my whole life without ever naming it clearly. The calm expectation of someone who has never been told no by anyone in this room and does not anticipate starting now. "Everything's fine," I said. My best friend Samantha caught my eye from across the room. She had been my best friend for 19 years, which meant she could read the set of my shoulders the way other people read words. Her eyebrow went up in the precise degree that meant what just happened and do you need me? I gave her the smallest shake of my head, not yet, because something had shifted in me, standing in that kitchen doorway with a platter in my hands, listening to my sister plan to borrow a thing I had worked for and saved for and wanted with the specific clarity of someone who is not given many things and knows the value of the ones she finds herself. Not rage, something quieter and more durable than rage. A decision arrived at without fanfare, the way the most important decisions usually are. Nora wanted the dress. And this time, for the first time in 28 years of being the other daughter, things were not going to go the way she expected. The dress had a history before I found it, as all the best things do. I had seen it first in a photograph, a small black and white image in the back of a fashion archive book I had found at a library sale for $2. The image showed a woman at what appeared to be a garden party in the late 1950s, standing at the edge of a group of people with the slightly separate quality of someone who has chosen her position deliberately. The dress she wore was ivory lace over a silk underlayer, the sleeves 3/4 length, the neckline a simple boat shape. Nothing about it was elaborate. Everything about it was exactly right. I tore the page out carefully and kept it in my wallet for 3 years before I found the dress itself. This was the way I had always operated, slowly, patiently, waiting for the right version of a thing rather than accepting the available approximation. It was a quality that had served me well professionally. I worked as a collections manager for a small natural history museum, a job that required exactly this kind of deliberate attention, and less well in the context of my family, who had been interpreting my patience as passivity for as long as I could remember. The pattern had established itself early. Nora was 3 years older and had arrived in the world with the gift of immediate legibility. She was beautiful and loud and certain, the kind of child who fills whatever room she is in, and my parents had responded to this the way people respond to things that are vivid. With their complete attention, they were not bad parents. They were parents who had organized themselves around one child's brightness and assumed, without examining the assumption, that the other child was fine. I had mostly been fine. That was the thing that made it complicated. I was good at school without needing to be celebrated for it. I made friends without requiring my parents to facilitate it. I handled disappointment without making it anyone else's problem. And my parents, watching this, had concluded that I was the easy one, which was not untrue, exactly, but which had the cumulative effect, over 28 years, of making me feel less like a daughter than like a feature of the household. Reliable, undemanding, present when needed, otherwise unremarkable. Nora's versions of the same events had always been louder and therefore more remembered. She remembered the birthday party differently from how I remembered it, the one where I turned 7 and she had decided, 3 candles into the singing, that she would like to blow them out. She had simply walked to the front of the group and done it, and my parents had laughed and said, "Nora, sweetheart," in the indulgent tone they used for things she did that should have been corrected but were too characteristic to feel truly wrong. I had stood behind my own birthday cake with my lungs still full of breath I hadn't used and understood. At 7, something I would spend the next 21 years relearning in different configurations. The prom date was a less ambiguous incident, and one I had stopped discussing because the discussion always arrived at the same place. Nora saying it was a misunderstanding, Mom saying boys that age were unreliable anyway, and the conversation repositioning itself so that the story was about Nora's romantic appeal rather than my abandoned corsage. The college acceptance letter was the one that had cost me the most. I had been waitlisted at my first choice and accepted at my second, and the acceptance email had arrived on a Thursday morning when I was in school. Nora, home with a cold, had seen it arrive on the family computer and had forwarded it to 3 people, friends of hers mostly, people who knew our family, before I had come home and read it myself. My first experience of my own news had been secondhand, mediated by my sister's telling of it, already shaped into a story that centered her knowledge of it rather than my receipt of it. When I had raised this carefully at dinner. "Oh, please, Alice, I was just excited for you." I had been excited too, I thought. I had not yet had the chance. The dress, then, was not just a dress. I understood this without sentimentalizing it. It was the first thing in my adult life that was entirely, unambiguously mine, found by me, paid for by me, chosen by me without reference to what Nora was doing or what my parents preferred or what any version of good daughter practicality required. It hung in my childhood closet in its garment bag, and I had not shown it to anyone except Samantha and Nicholas, because I was superstitious about it in the specific way of people who have learned that the things they love are not always safe. The night of the engagement party, I drove home with Nicholas and sat at our kitchen table while he made tea, and I told him what I had heard. He set the kettle down carefully. "What are you going to do?" "I don't know yet," I said, "but I'm not going to say yes." He looked at me for a moment, the look he had that was not assessing so much as attending, the full quality of his attention turned toward me without any agenda behind it. "Good," he said. He put the kettle back on. I sat with my hands wrapped around a mug that was not yet warm and thought about the photograph in my wallet. The woman at the garden party, standing slightly apart, her dress exactly right, her position deliberate. I had not been deliberate enough, not for long enough, that was going to change. Samantha arrived at 9 the next morning with coffee and the expression of someone who has already decided that what happened last night requires immediate analysis. She sat across from me at the kitchen table and I told her everything, the overheard conversation, the specific casualness of my mother's, I'm sure she wouldn't mind, the particular quality of Nora's voice when she said she always does. Samantha listened without interrupting, which was one of the things that made her an excellent person to tell things to. When I finished, she wrapped both hands around her coffee cup and said, "So what's the plan?" "I'm going to tell her no," I said, when she asks, and if she doesn't ask, if she just takes it, I had thought about this, then I'll go get it. Samantha nodded slowly. She had known me for 19 years and understood, better than almost anyone, the distance between the Alice who said fine at the dinner table and the Alice who sat in her own kitchen at 9 in the morning, having already made a decision and knowing, for the first time in as long as she could remember, that she was not going to unmake it. "I'm going to need you to just be there," I said, "when it happens, however it happens." "Obviously," Samantha said, as if this had never been in question. Nora came the next morning. She never called ahead. This was characteristic, a small, ongoing communication of the belief that her arrival was always welcome enough to make notice unnecessary. I heard the bell and already knew before I opened the door. She swept past me into the apartment with her designer bag swinging and the energy of someone who had predecided the outcome of the conversation and was here to efficiently navigate the formality of having it. "I need to talk to you about something," she said, settling onto my couch with the ease of someone in their own territory. I sat in the chair across from her and did not offer coffee. "Your wedding dress," she said. "The one at Mom and Dad's. I know which one. I want to borrow it." She leaned forward, her expression arranged into the configuration she used for requests she expected to receive. Warm, slightly appealing, carrying the faint suggestion that the person being asked would feel good about saying yes. "My wedding is in 3 months, yours isn't until next year. And it would be absolutely perfect for the garden ceremony, the lace, the color, all of it." "No," I said, the word sat between us. Nora's expression did not collapse, it recalibrated, moving from the warmth of anticipated agreement to something slightly more effortful. "Ally, I'm not lending you my wedding dress, Nora. It's just sitting in a closet. It's in a closet because that's where you keep things you're not using yet." I kept my voice level. "I found that dress. I saved for it." I paid for it myself, I'm not lending it. She studied me with the expression of someone encountering unexpected weather. I'll take perfect care of it. That's not the point. I'll pay for any cleaning. Nora, she stopped. The answer is no, I said. I'm not angry about you asking, but the answer is no. Another knock at the door. I had not called for backup, but I also had not needed to, because Samantha had texted at 8:30 that morning to say she was coming over, and the timing was Samantha's own instinct rather than any arrangement of mine. She walked in, took in the scene with the quick, comprehensive read of someone who had prepared for this, and sat down on the arm of my chair without being invited. "Morning," she said pleasantly to the room. Nora looked at her, then at me. "I didn't realize you had company." "I didn't realize you were coming," I said. The door opened again. Mom, of course, this was how it had always worked. Nora did not come alone to conversations she anticipated might require reinforcement. She came with the architecture of the family already in place, the implicit weight of it arranged behind her before a word was spoken. Mom came in carrying a garment bag. I recognized the bag. It was the one I had left in my childhood bedroom closet. "Girls," Mom said, with the warm efficiency of someone managing a logistics problem, "I thought we could do a quick fitting. Get a sense of the alterations needed." She unzipped the bag, my dress. I had not given anyone permission to take it from the closet. I had not given anyone permission to bring it here. The specific violation of this was not dramatic. It arrived quietly, the way the most significant things did, a recognition that sat in the chest rather than announcing itself out loud. "Mom," I said, "you went into my room. Don't be dramatic, sweetheart. We're family. You went into my room and took something that belongs to me without asking me first. It's just a dress. It is not just a dress." Nora had already crossed to where Mom held the garment open and was shrugging off her jacket with the practiced efficiency of someone who has been executing the same social maneuver for 31 years. Moving forward while others were still talking, establishing the fact of a thing before the conversation had concluded. "Oh, it's even more beautiful than I remembered." "Nora, stop." She stopped. Everyone looked at me. "I told you no," I said. "I told you clearly 10 minutes ago that the answer is no. And you brought Mom here with the dress already in a bag. That's not a conversation. That's a done deal you're asking me to ratify." Mom set the garment bag over the back of a chair. "Alice, honey, we're not asking you to give it up permanently. You took it without asking. That's already past the question of what you're asking. This is important to your sister. My wedding is important to me." Mom sighed. It was the sigh I had grown up with, the particular exhalation that meant you are making this harder than it needs to be. The sigh that was not unkind, but that had a 30-year history of being deployed in the service of making me smaller. "I need some air," I said. I walked to my front door and opened it. "Alice," Nora's voice, with a note in it I had not heard before, not the practiced warmth or the confident assumption, but something genuinely uncertain. "I'll be outside," I said. "Take the dress. If that's what's going to happen, then take it. But I want you to know that this time I'm not pretending it's fine." I closed the door behind me. In the hallway, I stood for a moment with my back against the door and my hands flat against the cool, painted wood, and I breathed. Down the hall, my neighbor's cat sat in the doorway of her apartment and regarded me with the specific indifference of cats. Samantha came out 2 minutes later. She closed the door quietly behind her and stood beside me in the hallway. "They're going," she said. "Nora's taking the dress." "I know. You okay?" I thought about it, honestly, taking the full measure of the question. "I'm not angry," I said, which surprised me as I said it. I thought I would be, but I think I needed to see it happen clearly without any ambiguity. Samantha leaned against the wall beside me. "So what now?" "Now," I said, "I figure out what I actually want to say, and then I say it in front of everyone." She nodded slowly. "When the rehearsal dinner," I said, "or the wedding. Wherever I have the most witnesses." My father found me in the backyard. I had excused myself from the rehearsal dinner table 20 minutes earlier, citing the need for air, and had been sitting on the old wooden swing in my parents' backyard since then. The same swing set that had been there since I was 6, its frame slightly rusted now, the chains making the particular sound of metal that has been weathered into a kind of permanent complaint. The night was clear and cool. Through the kitchen window, I could see the light and hear the sounds of the dinner. My mother's voice, Nora's laugh, the general warm noise of a family celebrating one of its own. The back door opened. Dad came out with his hands in his pockets and the slightly uncertain posture of a man approaching a conversation he is not sure how to have. He looked at me on the swing, then at the empty one beside it, and he sat down. We sat in silence for a moment. The chains creaked in the way of things that have been doing the same thing for a long time. "You've been quiet all evening," he said. "I've been quiet for 28 years," I said. "You're just noticing it tonight." He absorbed this. He was not a man who deflected quickly, one of his qualities that I had always respected, and that made conversations with him, when they happened, feel like they had the possibility of going somewhere. "The dress," he said, "the dress. I know you bought it yourself," he said. "The extra shifts, I saw the receipts, not on purpose, they were on the counter." He looked at his hands. I should have said something then. "I should have helped. You should have," I agreed. He nodded slowly. The chains creaked. "When Nora was small," he said, "she was so—" He paused, searching for the right word, present. "She demanded attention in a way that was very hard to look away from, and you were so easy," I said. "I was going to say self-sufficient, but yes." He looked at the window, at the warm light inside. "We told ourselves you were fine. That you didn't need the same." He stopped. "That's not an explanation, it's just what we told ourselves." "I know," I said. "Tomorrow," he said carefully, "something is going to happen, isn't it?" I looked at him. He was not asking whether, he was asking what, which meant he had already made a certain calculation about his daughter and arrived at an accurate conclusion. "I'm going to say what I should have said a long time ago," I told him. "In front of everyone, and I'm not going to take it back." He was quiet for a long time. The kitchen sounds drifted out through the glass. "I'm not going to stop you," he said finally. "I know." He reached into his jacket and took out an envelope. He held it for a moment before he offered it to me. "For the dress, whatever you find next, whatever you want." He paused. "It's late. I know it's late." I took the envelope. "Felt the weight of it? Better late than not," I said. He nodded. The swing beside me creaked as he stood. At the back door, he turned. He started. "Your mother's heart. Literally, I mean, she had that procedure last year. Just keep that in mind, whatever you say." "I will," I said. "I'm not trying to hurt anyone, Dad. I'm trying to be seen." He went back inside. I sat on the swing for another few minutes in the cool dark, the chains creaking, the window light steady and warm, and I thought about what I was going to do, and I did not talk myself out of it. Back at the dinner table, the toast had begun. Dad raised his glass first. "To Nora," he said, "on the eve of her wedding, you've always been our—" He stopped. He looked at me across the table, a brief, specific look, the look of a man who has just been in a conversation and has not yet fully rejoined the performance. "You've always been someone we love very much," he finished. It was not the toast he had planned, I was certain of it, and Nora looked at him with a slight frown at the anticlimactic landing, and Mom looked at him with a slight frown of a different kind, and I held his gaze for a moment and then looked down at my plate. "I'd like to say something," Nora said, which was not unusual. Nora always wanted to say something. She raised her glass toward me, to Alice for being such a supportive sister. "I know this whole wedding situation has been," she made a small, graceful gesture, "a lot, but you've always come through." The table waited for me to respond. I set down my fork. "I want to say something too," I said. The table continued to wait. "I found that dress 4 months ago," I said. "I went to 11 shops looking for it. I put down the deposit with overtime money, 3 months of extra shifts because the budget Mom and Dad offered wasn't going to cover it. I kept my voice even, which was not difficult because I had moved past the place where this required effort. Last week, Mom took it from my closet without asking and brought it to my apartment for a fitting. Nora is wearing it tomorrow." The table was very quiet. "I'm not telling this story to ruin the evening," I said. "I'm telling it because tomorrow Nora is going to walk down an aisle in my dress, and every person at that wedding is going to think it's beautiful, and none of them will know whose it is. And I have spent 28 years letting things become stories that are told without me in them." I picked up my glass. "So I'm in this one, that's all." Mom's face had gone through several expressions and arrived at the one I recognized least. Not anger, not disappointment, but something that looked like a person encountering a reflection they were not prepared for. Nora had not moved. "Alice," she started. "You don't have to say anything tonight," I said. "The dress is yours for tomorrow. I meant what I said last week, take it, but I wanted it on record, in front of everyone." I looked around the table at the friends and family who had gathered for this pre-wedding dinner, none of whom were now looking anywhere except at me. I wanted to be in the room when the story was told. I picked up my fork. "The food is really good, Mom," I said. The ceremony was in a garden that had been arranged for maximum beauty, white chairs in rows, rose petals on the path, the afternoon light coming in at an angle that made everything look like it had been specifically lit. I stood with the other guests and watched Nora come down the aisle between our parents, and she was genuinely beautiful, the way she had always been, and the dress moved with the particular quality I had fallen in love with when I first saw it. I stood with Nicholas on my left and Samantha on my right, and I watched my dress carry my sister toward the man she was marrying, and I felt not what I had expected to feel, something simpler. During the vows, Nora's voice wavered once. It was not a performance waver. I had known Nora's performance wavers for 31 years, and this was not one of them. It was the real kind, the kind that comes when a person is standing in front of everyone they know saying something they mean completely, and the weight of it arrives without warning. Ashton, she said, from the moment I met you, and stopped for a moment, recollecting herself. Ashton reached over and took her hand without waiting. I looked at Nicholas beside me. He was watching the ceremony with the expression he had when something interested him, open, quiet, attentive. He felt me looking and turned, and his hand found mine without either of us making a thing of it. After the ceremony, during the movement of guests from ceremony to reception, Nora found me. She was still in the dress. She looked the same as she had at the altar, hair slightly loosened by the afternoon, holding her bouquet in one hand, and she stopped in front of me on the garden path with the guests moving around us on both sides. I want to talk about last night, she said. You don't have to. I want to. She was not using any of her social registers. This was the voice she had used at 7 and 8 and 9, before the competition had fully established itself, before we had each taken our assigned positions in the family's narrative. What you said at dinner about the dress, about spending 28 years, she stopped. I knew, I want you to know that, not every specific time, not with full awareness, but I knew. I held her gaze. I told myself you were fine with it, she said, because you were always fine, you were always the one who was fine. She looked down at the dress, at the lace on the sleeve, the hem lying exactly as it should against the grass path. I should have paid for this, at minimum, I should have. Nora, she looked up. Go get married, I said. That's what today is for. Something shifted in her face. Not resolution, the other thing, the thing that comes before resolution, when a person understands that they are at the beginning of something that is going to take a long time. I'll send it to the cleaners, she said, whatever it costs, and then I'm going to give it back. You don't, I know I don't have to, she straightened slightly. I'm going to, she went back to her wedding. I stood on the garden path for a moment and then found Nicholas and Samantha where I had left them. And the three of us went to find our table for the reception. And I picked up a glass of champagne and tasted it and thought that it was very good. The first Sunday dinner I skipped was easy. The second was harder, not because I wanted to go, but because absence has its own weight, the specific heaviness of a space you used to fill. By the third, I had established a rhythm of Saturday morning calls with Dad instead, which had been his suggestion, just us, nothing fancy, whenever you have 20 minutes. The calls were, improbably, the best conversations we had ever had. On the fourth one, he told me something I had not known, that he had gone to my museum once on a Thursday afternoon to see an exhibition I had mentioned in passing. He had not told me he was going. He had not told anyone. He had walked through the collections I had spent 3 years helping to organize, and looked at the labels and the arrangement and the specific quality of attention that the work showed. And he had gone home and not said anything because he did not know, at the time, how to cross the distance that had accumulated between saying nothing and saying everything. I should have told you, he said on the phone on a Saturday morning in November. You're telling me now, I said. I heard him exhale. You know, you're very like me in some ways. In the ways I wish I'd acted on sooner. I sat with that for a moment. Dad, I said, come to the museum. I'll show you around properly. A pause. I'd like that, he said. Mom called in November too, on a Tuesday evening, which was her calling time. She had always called on Tuesdays. I was not sure she was aware of this. She did not open with an apology. She opened with a question. When you said we never saw you, just you, not in comparison to Nora, what did you mean specifically? I was sitting at my kitchen table with a cup of tea, and I looked at the wall for a moment, and then I told her, specifically. The birthday candles, the prom date, the acceptance letter, the engagement response. The dress, not as a list of grievances, but as a list of examples, the way you give examples when you are trying to explain something precisely rather than convince someone of something. She listened. I could hear when she was about to say, but the intake of breath that preceded the redirection, and several times she caught it and did not say it. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment. I thought I was teaching you to be strong, she said finally. By not wrapping you in the same, she stopped. I see that that's not what it felt like. No, I said. I don't know how to do this, she said, and the honesty in it was the most direct thing she had said to me, possibly ever. Neither do I said, but I think we start here. She came to Sunday dinner the following week, not the family dinner, which I was not yet ready for, but a separate Sunday, just the four of us. Me and Nicholas, Mom and Dad, at our apartment, where Nicholas cooked and I set the table, and Mom brought wine she had chosen herself rather than sent ahead, which was its own kind of effort. She looked around the apartment the way she had never quite looked at it before, taking it in rather than measuring it. She stopped at the framed photograph on the bookshelf. Me and Nicholas and Samantha at a friend's wedding 2 years ago, all three of us mid-laugh at something just outside the frame. You look happy, she said. I am, I said. She nodded. She moved on to look at the bookshelf. She did not say anything else about the photograph, but she did not need to. The boutique on Clement Street had been Samantha's suggestion. On the morning 6 weeks after the wedding, when I had woken up and decided it was time to think about what I actually wanted, not the dress. I had known that since the morning I had stood in my hallway and watched Nora drive away with the garment bag. Something was finished in me regarding the dress, not bitterly, not in the way of things that are lost, but in the way of things that have served their purpose. The dress had been the clearest possible illustration of what I had been allowing, and now that I could see it clearly, I did not need to reclaim it. I needed to find what I actually wanted, which might be something I had not imagined yet. Try the suit, Samantha had said. It was not a plan so much as an instinct. You've been talking about that photograph in the magazine for 6 months, the ivory tuxedo. Try it. The boutique was small and unhurried, and the consultant brought out 3 options without trying to guide me toward any of them. I slipped into the first, the ivory tuxedo, simple lapels, no embellishment, and stood in front of the mirror. Mom arrived 20 minutes late. She came in a little breathless from the parking, registered the boutique, registered Samantha, registered me in the mirror, and stopped. I waited. Oh, she said. It was not a qualified O, not the O that precedes a but or an are you sure or a most brides. It was simply O, the sound of a person receiving something directly. That's you, she said. That's what I thought, I said. She came to stand beside me in the mirror, and we looked at each other's reflections, her in her Tuesday coat, me in ivory wool, the consultant quietly retreating to give us room. Nora called me this week, Mom said. Not introducing it, not managing it, just saying it, the way she had been practicing saying things directly since November. She asked about you. I know, she texted me. Mom's eyes in the mirror. What did she say? She asked if I wanted to get coffee. A pause. Will you go? I considered the question honestly, the way I had been trying to do with questions that deserved honesty. Maybe, I said, not yet. But maybe, Mom nodded. She straightened the shoulder of the jacket slightly, a small, practical gesture, the kind she made when she was in a room and something was in her hands. The beading on that sleeve is a little loose, she said. On the left side, I saw that, I said. I'll ask them to fix it. She smoothed the fabric and stepped back and looked at the whole of it, me, the suit, the mirror, the morning light through the boutique window, with the expression of someone seeing a thing clearly that they have been looking at sideways for a long time. Dad appeared in the boutique doorway. He had come without announcement, which was new. Dad had always announced himself, had always called ahead, had always built the small architecture of preparation around his arrivals. He stood in the doorway of the boutique in his Saturday jacket, looking at me in the mirror, and his face did the thing it had done on the phone when he told me about the museum visit. The expression of a man who has arrived somewhere he should have been sooner and is deciding not to spend time on the delay. That's the one, he said simply. I think so, I said. He came in and sat down in the chair the consultant offered and crossed his arms and looked at me in the mirror with the particular quality of attention. I had been waiting 28 years for someone in this family to turn in my direction. Complete, uncomplicated, specifically mine. Samantha caught my eye in the mirror and said nothing, which was exactly right. The consultant brought out one more option, a version with a subtle woven pattern in the fabric that caught the light differently at different angles. And I tried it over the ivory tuxedo and stood in front of the mirror with both possibilities in my hands. And my mother stood beside me, and my father sat in the chair behind me. And the morning light came through the window at the angle it came through every morning and made everything look like what it was. Outside, through the boutique window, the street went about its ordinary business. A delivery truck, 2 women with a stroller, a man carrying a paper bag from the coffee place on the corner. I took off the second jacket and handed it back to the consultant. I straightened the lapels of the ivory tuxedo. This one, I said. I was not talking only about the suit, and everyone in the room understood that, and no one needed to say so. My phone was on the counter beside my bag. Nora's text was still there, unanswered. The coffee offer is real. No pressure. Whenever I picked up the phone, I typed next week. You picked the place. I put the phone back down. The consultant began writing up the alterations, the loose beading on the left sleeve, a minor adjustment at the shoulder, the hem to be taken up half an inch, small corrections, the kind that takes something already close to right and make it exactly right. I stood in the mirror and watched my father lean forward in the chair behind me to say something to my mother, and she listened with her head slightly tilted, and then she said something back, and he laughed, quietly, just the two of them, the way people laugh when they are not performing it. I turned back to the mirror. The suit was exactly right, not because it was what anyone expected or what most brides wore or what Nora would have chosen or what any version of the good daughter practicality had ever suggested, but because it was mine, found by me, chosen by me, altered to fit precisely, and I was going to wear it at my wedding while the people who loved me watched, and all of them were going to be looking at me. The consultant set down her pen. "We'll have everything ready in 2 weeks," she said. "Perfect," I said. Outside, the street continued its ordinary morning. Inside, the light moved across the floor in the slow way of light that has all the time it needs. I did not move to take the suit off. I stood in the mirror a little longer in no particular hurry, watching the light.